the average age of the people in this call is about 16, and you were 16 in like 1995, right?
That's right. Thank you for reminding everybody. I appreciate that. That's a strong opening to
Ye-
remind the oldest person on the call of how old they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives really cool context because, like, thinking about like 1995, I wonder what it's like to be a teen interested or like thinking about studying tech because you did
Yeah.
study like electrical engineering, computer science. So, like, tell us what it was like to be a teenager interested in tech in the 90s.
Yes. So, the dinosaurs died shortly before I was a teenager. The meteorite came and took care of them. So that wasn't so much of a problem. The saber tooths were still a bit scary. Look,
Mhm.
you're right. Tech was very different. There's lots of challenges that your generation is facing, right? It's very difficult. There are a lot of reasons why it's very difficult to grow right now. But one way it's much better to grow up right now is if you're interested in tech and especially security. There's so many more ways that you can learn from others, engage with people in the community, and do so legally and safely, right? Which was a real problem for us. So I was a bit younger, hopefully, than most of the people on the call. I was 8 when I got my Commodore 64. So Santa Claus brought me a Commodore. This is a very ugly computer, and it just looks like a big brown keyboard, and then hooked up into a low res color TV. And I got a 300 baud modem. 300 symbols per second is you can generally type faster than that. So you'd actually be typing, and you'd have to wait for the buffer to catch up to you. I this was like a gateway for me into a whole nother world of people who are interested in computers, interested in tech, interested in security. So we had bulletin board systems at the time. So you dial in with your modem. This would take over the phone line. And so, since we didn't have mobile phones, that was the one phone line for our entire family of 6. And I'd get yelled at a lot. Eventually, they got me a second phone line. And so you'd call into BBSs and you'd interact with people often asynchronously because people wouldn't be dialed up all day. They wouldn't have connectivity up all day. And I got into the local hacking club in Sacramento, California, where I grew up. So 2600, was a famous magazine, and they had these local meetups, and they had them in Sacramento. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to meet people who were very different, and I met people online. And then, kind of in the '90s, when the internet got big, that was over IRC, Internet Relay Chat, and such. And at the time, if you wanted to learn about security and you wanted to try things out, there's really no legal way to do it. So a lot of this stuff we were doing wasn't completely legal. Now, I was part of that group of people who was never trying to do really damaging things, but there's some very fascinating stories of folks who are friends of mine now, who are my age, who, when they were teenagers, were doing things that were a little more destructive, especially in New York. There's this famous battle between two different New York hacking clubs, one of which was mostly kids that went to the same private school on the Upper East Side, and was called like the most dangerous hackers on the planet by the Secret Service, and just for like playing games with the phone company at the time. And so that kind of stuff was like, we would do things that wasn't 100% legal, but would teach us these kinds of things. And then I got into a bigger world when I got a little bit older because I was able to travel a bit. So I went to DEF CON. I think it was DEF CON 3 or 4 was the first one. So DEF CON's going on right now. It's starting today. I hope you're all participating. Usually DEF CON would not be available to folks your age because it's in Vegas. You'd have to take your parents. They'd have to rent a hotel room and stuff. And now DEF CON is totally open to everybody. So I hope everybody participates in DEF CON. But look, when I started going to it, it was only a couple hundred people. And it was like a totally wide open world to meet all those folks. And then I was fortunate in that I, had decently good grades. I was able to go to a pretty good public school in Sacramento. So I was able to get into Berkeley, study electrical engineering, and do legit stuff. And since then, I've been working in the security world. And an interesting thing about my career, which I think actually reflects kind of the security industry overall, is I used to be very focused on kind of traditional infosec, right? Like hacking and network security, and then software security. I started a company with some friends of mine in 2004, and we were some of the first people to do mobile security, and that was really good for us. But that's still like kind of traditional infosec. And then after I joined Yahoo and then Facebook, I started to realize that there's actually this whole wide world of stuff that the security community was ignoring, which is all the ways people can use technology to harm each other without any actual hacking, right? And in the industry, we call this often trust and safety, which is kind of a weird term and doesn't totally encapsulate it. But you can build a system that people can't hack into, that it's impossible to violate it. I mean, you can't really build a system like that, but imagine you can. Then generally there are ways people can manipulate that to do bad things. And so that's a lot of what I've been focused on in my work at Stanford, is trying to bridge that gap a little bit, which is, the traditional security world that cares about hacking and vulnerabilities and exploits and stuff, with the people who are studying what is the impact of people being online all day? What is the impact? What are the opportunities for disinformation when you have the ability for every single one of us carrying around what this would have been when I was your age, this was a satellite truck, right? Like the technology you have here only belonged to massive corporations, and you all have that capability. And now that gives us incredible powers, right? Like if you see what's going on societally with BLM and such, it only exists because of the ability of people to document the lived experience of people that used to be ignored. But the flip side is it also brings the possibility of disinformation and manipulation at a much wider scale. And so we're doing a lot of work at Stanford to kind of study that, because I think that's actually, the hacking stuff is still interesting. There's still interesting hacking going on. If you want to talk about that, I do a lot of work around nation state work too, about governments hacking into companies and such. But I'm also really interested in, like, if you use the product how it's supposed to be, what bad thing can happen.